Hi everyone, it's the second Sunday in Advent and I thought that I'd share a short reflection on the Bible readings that have been set for today. The first reading I'm going to be reflecting on is from Malachi chapter 3 verse 1 to 4, and the psalm is actually a song that comes from Luke's Gospel. I'm going to be reflecting on that as well. It's in Luke chapter 1 verse 68 to 79. It's the Song of Zechariah, sometimes it's called the Benedictus. So feel free to pause the video for a moment and have a read of those, or you can find a musical version of the Song of Zechariah and listen to that, and then just start the video again. So it's the second week of Advent, and again we've got a rather ominous reading from Malachi. It doesn't seem very festive. As I was saying last week, Advent is not entirely about expectations of the arrival of baby Jesus at Christmas. There is a bit of that expectation, and we get more and more of it as we get closer to Christmas. But the main theme of Advent is expectation of the return of Christ, expectation of the realization of the reign of God, an expectation of justice being restored on the earth. Last week's readings had some potentially uncomfortable words about judgment. This week, in the reading from Malachi, we have some talk of God refining and purifying God's people. I don't know how you feel about the idea of being refined, but it doesn't sound very pleasant, does it? When refining silver or gold or other metals, the metal is put under intense heat and melted down so that any impurities will rise to the top and can be separated from the pure metal. And when we go through a time of great difficulty, we might feel like we're feeling the heat. We might feel like our impurities are being brought to the surface. We might feel like we're going through a positive transformation in that. But I think we need to be careful about saying that experiencing difficulty means being refined by God. Because difficulty on top of difficulty on top of difficulty, it may not refine us, it might break us. On Friday, I attended a rally at the State Library where local First Peoples were calling for an end to deaths in custody. First Peoples make up a small percentage of the population on this continent, but make up over a quarter of the prison population. And that means that many First Peoples die in custody. There was a Royal Commission looking into this in 1991, which made 339 recommendations, but most of them have not been followed. Since that time, 485 Indigenous folk have died in custody. That's more than one a month. And there's been 3 deaths in custody of Indigenous people in the last month. A 26-year-old man died in Shortland Correctional Centre in Cessnock on November 7. 2 days later, police shot and killed Stanley Russell, a 46-year-old Gomeroi man, inside his aunt's house in northwest Sydney. And on the 1st of November, a 30-year-old Indigenous woman died in the custody of Dame Phyllis Frost Centre, a maximum security women's prison in Deer Park here in Melbourne. And the state government here is in the process of expanding Dame Phyllis Frost Centre, creating capacity for more incarcerations. And the government has celebrated this expansion because it'll create jobs. We shouldn't be trying to expand our prisons. We should be looking at the alternatives. We should be looking at forms of justice that restore people and restore communities and allow communities to live in peace, to restore peace in communities. That's something that we colonist and migrant people would benefit from too. Getting back to the idea of suffering as a refining process, I don't think it's appropriate to say that this suffering under police and suffering under the prison system that's inflicted particularly on First Peoples as a group is to refine them. In fact, this is part of how a colonist society is seeking to break First Peoples, just as immigration detention is intended to break refugees who seek to come here. When Malachi uses the image of refining, he has a particular focus on two Jewish tribes, the tribe of Levi and the tribe of Judah. Malachi seems to have been written in the period after Jewish people had returned from exile, and with Persian sponsorship they'd been able to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem and the Jerusalem temple. And all of Malachi's criticisms, he may be criticizing Jewish leaders, but he's a Jewish person himself. So this is criticism that's happening within the Jewish community. It's not a non-Jewish person saying negative things about people who are Jewish. Most of the book is made up of Malachi condemning the corruption, dishonesty, and injustice perpetrated by the tribe of Levi, which is the tribe of priests, and the tribe of Judah, which is the tribe of kings. It seems that this refinement is particularly focused on those in power, who are in a sense holding the reins of society. In the Song of Zechariah, we hear the voice of an elderly priest from the tribe of Levi. And he's singing this after a number of things have happened. So basically, while he was serving in the temple, he says that he received a visit from an angel telling him not to be afraid, as angels often do in these stories. And the angel's telling him that he and his wife, Elizabeth, will have their first son, even though they're elderly. And the angel says that their son will turn Israel back to their God, that he'll turn the hearts of parents toward their children, and that he'll call people to live honestly and fairly, preparing the way for someone else who is on their way. So the angel is predicting the birth of John the Baptist, who will prepare the way for Jesus. Miracle birth stories occur throughout the Jewish scripture, so we might expect that this priest Zechariah will know that this is a pattern in the way that God has worked previously. But instead he asks the angel how he can believe this. It seems that Zechariah is no longer afraid of the angel, but is instead taking it. It seems that he's instead struggling to take what the angel is saying seriously. Because of this, the story says that he has to experience a loss of speech until the baby arrives. This man, who has had a voice close to the center of society as a priest serving in the temple, will no longer have a voice. I wonder how that experience may have affected Zechariah. I wonder if he experienced his time of silence as a time of refinement. When the baby arrives, he recovers his voice and sings the psalm that we've heard this morning, the Benedictus, announcing that God has redeemed Israel, buying them out of captivity, saving them from their enemies, from the colonizing forces of the Roman rulers, forces that were trying to break them down. The question I've been wondering about is, have the lockdowns and other difficulties of the last 2 years been a refining experience? I don't think we should be too quick to come to a conclusion about that question. I think we're yet to see the full impact of that experience. I know a lot of people found that the restrictions pushed them to breaking point and beyond. Sometimes life was already difficult enough as it was, and this was the last thing that we needed. I wonder if it's possible for this experience of isolation to shape our attitudes toward people who are incarcerated, whether that is in the prison system or in immigration detention. Because this experience could lead us towards greater solidarity in our society. This experience could lead us to put the heat on our leaders to demand something better, to refine our society so that it's more just and so that all people can experience peace. I invite you to take some time just to reflect on what God's Spirit might be saying to you in this time and place.